It happened outside Waco, Texas, a heavily armed compound, a religious cult.
4 law enforcement agents are dead.
Federal agents prepared for the worst in dealing with the Branch Davidians and cult leader David Koresh.
Exit the compound and keep your hands in the air.
In the chill of an early February morning, the first shots rang out that would sear the name Waco into the world's consciousness. It began with a failed raid from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, ATF, on the Branch Davidians led by David Koresh. The failed operation left casualties on both sides, and it set the stage for a 51-day standoff between the religious sect and federal agents. The U.S. authorities suspected the sect was stockpiling military-grade weapons. As negotiations between the FBI and Koresh dragged on, the situation grew increasingly precarious. The world watched, holding its breath, as the standoff escalated with the FBI. By the time the standoff ended on the 19th of April, 1993, more than 80 lives had been lost. Welcome to Cults Uncovered. This is the true story of David Koresh, the machine gun preacher.
Do you consider yourself a prophet?
Let me say this much. I consider myself someone who's found grace in the sight of Christ. And if I can be a prophet to you by giving you a study about the Bible, then yeah, I'm a prophet.
In the sprawling metropolis of Houston, Texas, a child named Vernon Wayne Howell, who would later be known to the world as David Koresh, entered the fray of life under less than auspicious circumstances. Born to a teenage mother, Bonnie Clark, in 1959, his early years were marked by the absence of a father and the transient affection of a mother who soon left him in the care of his grandparents. The isolation of his childhood was compounded by the cruel taunts of his peers who derisively nicknamed him Vernie. Struggling with dyslexia, Koresh found little solace in the rigid confines of school, eventually dropping out of high school. Yet, amidst this turmoil, he discovered 2 profound passions that would shape his future: a natural talent for music and an insatiable hunger for biblical knowledge. By the tender age of 12, he had committed vast swathes of scripture to memory, a feat that belied his academic struggles. As Koresh stepped into his 20s, he sought belonging within the Church of Seventh-day Adventists, the very church his mother once frequented. However, his unconventional ideas and bad influence on the youth led to his expulsion, setting him adrift once more. Hollywood beckoned with the siren call of rock stardom, but success remained elusive, and Koresh's path took yet another turn. It wasn't until 1981 when he found his way to Waco, Texas, where he joined the Branch Davidians, did he found his true calling. The Branch Davidians are a religious sect on the fringes of society with over 1,400 members. They originated from a splinter group of the Davidian Seventh-day Adventist Church, which itself emerged from the broader Seventh-day Adventist movement in the 1930s. The group's name references their belief in being the branch mentioned in biblical prophecies, particularly in Isaiah 11 verse 1. The Branch Davidians also emphasized strict adherence to Old Testament laws and rituals, including dietary restrictions and observance of the Sabbath on Saturdays. They viewed themselves as a remnant chosen by God to prepare for the end of the world and to lead others into salvation. Here, Koresh's charisma and zeal found fertile ground, and he quickly entwined himself in the fabric of the community, so much so that he became entangled in an affair with the leader of the sect, the aging prophetess Lois Roden, who was then in her late 60s. The two later traveled to Israel together, where Lois Roden unfortunately died. The death of Lois Roden ignited a fierce power struggle between her son George Roden and David Koresh. George saw himself as the natural successor, the rightful heir to the prophetic throne, but Koresh, armed with audacious ambition and the support of those disenchanted with George's leadership, envisioned a different future for the Branch Davidians. In the early 1980s, a young David Koresh found refuge and purpose within the Branch Davidians, a sect nestled in the rural expanse of Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas. His fervor and charisma quickly entwined him with the community's leadership, particularly with the aging prophetess Lois Roden. Yet, beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, a storm of ambition and ideological clashes with Lois's son, George Roden. The death of Lois Roden was the catalyst for an all-out power struggle. George Roden, emboldened by his belief in his rightful succession as the leader of the Branch Davidians, sought to maintain the traditional teachings and practices of the sect. He espoused a conservative approach, emphasizing adherence to established doctrines and rejecting Koresh's perceived deviations from the sect's founding principles. In contrast, David Koresh represented a radical departure from the status quo, advocating for a reinterpretation of Branch Davidian beliefs and the implementation of new spiritual practices. He viewed himself as a prophetic figure, chosen by divine revelation to lead the sect into a new era of enlightenment and salvation. The escalating conflict eventually reached a boiling point in 1985 when David Koresh and his followers made the bold decision to leave Mount Carmel and establish a new settlement in Palestine, East Texas. This dramatic departure underscored the depth of the division within the Branch Davidian community. In November 1987, Koresh and his loyal followers launched an armed incursion into Mount Carmel. They were clad in camouflage and armed with 5 223 caliber semi-automatic assault rifles, 2 22 caliber rifles, 2 12-gauge shotguns, and nearly 400 rounds of ammunition ready to take leadership of Branch Davidians with force. The raid resulted in a gunfight, during which Roden was injured, and Koresh and his associates surrendered to authorities. Koresh and his followers were charged with the attempted murder of George Roden, leading to a trial in 1988. In his defense, Koresh claimed they had gone to Mount Carmel in search of evidence of corpse abuse by rivals within the Branch Davidian community and that their gunfire was aimed at trees, not individuals. George Roden's testimony swayed the jury to acquit Koresh when he openly admitted to attempted resurrection by explaining how he exhumed a woman's body to raise her from the dead. This only served to encourage the jury to drop charges and acquit David Koresh and his men of any wrongdoing. Roden was angry at the fact that Koresh and his followers were not punished and shouted that Koresh must be imprisoned. His outrage got him charged with contempt of court and he was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment. This marked the beginning of Roden's downfall and left the door wide open for Koresh to ascend unchallenged. Things got worse for George, who spiraled into debt and was later convicted and imprisoned in a mental institution for murder after he violently killed a man named Dale Adair who told George he was the Messiah. In response, George split open Adair's skull with an axe. With Roden out of the picture, Koresh seized the opportunity to solidify his leadership within the Branch Davidians. By 1989, Koresh had not only secured his leadership but had also transformed Mount Carmel into a flourishing community under his divine mandate. His followers saw in him not just a leader but a living deity, and his influence grew to rival that of infamous cult figures like Marshall Applewhite and Jim Jones. Koresh's Mount Carmel was a testament to his vision, a compound complete with a chapel, living quarters, and even recreational facilities. It was a sanctuary for those who believed, a fortress for a prophet, and the stage for one of history's most contentious religious standoffs. Real quick guys, are you tired of endless music searches for your content creation? Frustrated by licensing hassles? Look no further. Epidemic Sound is your go-to music licensing platform. They have a massive library where you can access high-quality music tracks and sound effects across genres, moods, and themes. You can build a customizable playlist where you tailor your music to fit your content. You don't have to pay royalty fees. Simply download and use as many tracks as you want anywhere online. Their library is authentic and diverse. Whether you are looking for electronic beats, pop, hip-hop, or cinematic vibes, they've got it all. They are trusted worldwide by millions of creators, from vloggers to filmmakers. Ready to elevate your content? Click on the link in the description to get a 7-day free trial today. David Koresh claimed to be the final prophet, the Lamb of God mentioned in the Book of Revelation, and asserted authority over the Branch Davidian community. Koresh's teachings included a complex theology that blended elements of Christianity, Judaism, and apocalypticism. He emphasized the importance of spiritual purity and obedience to his leadership as essential for salvation. Koresh's charismatic personality and perceived ability to offer spiritual insights appealed to many within the Branch Davidian community, particularly those who were seeking a deeper understanding of biblical prophecy and a sense of belonging in a tight-knit religious community. Additionally, Koresh's promise of personal salvation and a place in the coming kingdom of God resonated with individuals who were drawn to the community's apocalyptic worldview and who sought answers to life's existential questions in the tumultuous times of the late 20th century. Koresh used charisma and manipulative charm to take undue advantage of his followers. Allegations started emerging to cast long shadows over the community and its enigmatic leader. He was alleged to have been involved in multiple incidents of physical and sexual abuse of children. His teachings included the practice of what is referred to as spiritual weddings, This involved Koresh engaging in sexual relationships with multiple members, including the wives of his willing followers whom he considered to be spiritually chosen. These relationships were often characterized by Koresh as sacred unions, symbolizing spiritual devotion and commitment. Some of these spiritual weddings involved underage girls, while Koresh's followers viewed these unions as part of their religious beliefs and practices. The doctrine of the sect was said to be a divine revelation, a command to produce 24 children who would become the ruling elders in the aftermath of Christ's return. Among those chosen for this sacred duty was Michelle Jones, barely a teenager, and the younger sister of Koresh's legal wife. He hid his marriage to Michelle by assigning a surrogate husband, David Thibodeau, to the girl to keep up appearances. In 1992, an investigation was carried out by the Texas Child Protection Services, and they probed the compound for 6 months. Yet the evidence remained elusive. They failed to find conclusive evidence of sexual abuse, possibly due to the concealment of Koresh's spiritual marriages. Reports surfaced of Koresh severely spanking his son Cyrus for several minutes on consecutive visits to the child's bedroom. A man involved in a custody battle reported witnessing the beating of a young boy with a stick during a visit to the Mount Carmel Center. As the 51-day standoff with the FBI reached its zenith, the allegations of child abuse within Mount Carmel became the fulcrum of the government's justification for intervention. Attorney General Janet Reno spoke of babies being beaten. Detractors and ex-members fueled the fire of accusation, their testimonies painting Koresh as a man who annulled marriages and claimed exclusive rights to the women and girls of the sect. He was alleged to have fathered children with underage girls in the Branch Davidians. He was also said to be infatuated with American pop star Madonna and claimed that God told him, "I will give thee Madonna." After Koresh took over leadership, he and his followers entered the business of buying and selling guns and other ammunitions. Their business had grown, and they now had a stockpile of illegal military-grade weapons and explosives, including automatic firearms and grenades at Mount Carmel. In February 1992, a UPS package scheduled for delivery to Mount Carmel was accidentally opened prior to delivery, and the driver found a box of hand grenades in it. This prompted him to alert the authorities. The McLennan County Sheriff's Department invited the ATF to investigate possible federal gun violations after this report, given the history of shootouts in the compound. The UPS driver reported delivering large shipments of gun parts, ammo, chemicals and military gear to Mount Carmel, which he thought was strange given that Koresh and his followers were supposed to be a religious sect. The ATF investigation revealed that the cult had been amassing illegal weapons. Former members revealed to ATF prior to the raid that the weapons were for apocalyptic battle with the US government, in which they would all be killed and he would resurrect with his faithful followers to slaughter and judge God's enemies. At this point, authorities had deemed Koresh and his followers a threat to the larger society, and they needed to act. The Waco siege began on February 28, 1993, shrouded in the early morning mist. When the ATF agents approached the imposing Mount Carmel Center with warrants to search the property and arrest Koresh, the ATF's tactical approach to the raid was informed by the belief that a swift and decisive show of force would minimize the risk to agents and maximize the element of surprise, thus increasing their chances of successfully executing their warrants. But this quickly spiraled into a deadly exchange of gunfire, claiming the lives of 4 federal agents and 6 Branch Davidians. Koresh himself sustained gunshot wounds. It was unclear who fired the first shot, but the situation quickly became the beginning of a full-blown siege that captured the world's attention. Shortly after the first raid, the FBI hostage rescue team took over command, treating the situation as a hostage situation. Negotiations unfolded over the next 51 days, with telephone lines becoming lifelines as FBI negotiators sought to unravel Koresh's complex tapestry of biblical imagery and prophecy. Despite his gunshot wounds, Koresh remained resolute, requesting time to pen religious documents he claimed were essential before his surrender. The negotiations were dense with scriptural references and reflected a man who saw himself as a pivotal figure in a divine plan. As the siege wore on, the world outside looked on in horror and anticipation. Attorney General Janet Reno, faced with the weight of the decision, authorized a final advance to end the standoff. On April 19, 1993, the FBI deployed CS gas into the compound, hoping to force an end to the impasse. But as the armored vehicles breached the walls of Mount Carmel, tragedy struck. Flames engulfed the compound, and when the smoke cleared, 79 Branch Davidians lay dead, including 21 children under the age of 16. The questions of how the fire started and who was responsible remain subjects of fierce debate to this day. Among the deceased was David Koresh, the enigmatic leader whose body bore the marks of a gunshot wound to the head. One FBI official speculated that Steve Schneider, Koresh's right-hand man, probably realized that he was dealing with a fraud and so shot and killed Koresh before turning the gun on himself. The medical examiner reported 20 people, including 5 children under the age of 14, had been shot, and a 3-year-old had been stabbed in the chest. The siege of Waco stands as a stark reminder of the fine line between faith and fanaticism, the complexities of religious freedom, and the profound consequences when government force meets immovable conviction. The Waco siege remains one of the most harrowing events in modern American history, a stark reminder of the potential for tragedy when ideological conviction collides with governmental force. The aftermath left a nation grappling with grief and disbelief, as 86 lives of agents, believers, and innocents alike were extinguished. Today, where the Mount Carmel Center once stood, there is little but a gaping void, a silent testament to the lives lost. Yet, the memory of the siege endures, a sober echo through the heart of America. For those who survived, the scars are indelible, the pain a constant companion. In the wake of the tragedy, the nation wrestled with questions of governmental overreach and the delicate balance between freedom and security. Many view Waco as the U.S. government systematically murdering or repressing law-abiding gun owners. Calling what happened a siege may suggest that the law enforcement raid was right, while massacre underlines the deaths of innocents. As the Branch Davidian compound lay in ruin, questions were asked and are still being asked over the federal government's handling of the situation. Victims' families sued U.S. agencies for wrongful death, but after a 7-year legal battle, the court ruled that the FBI and ATF had acted properly. A British investigation concluded that the FBI's final assault had been badly planned and doomed to failure, though Koresh was invariably to blame for the slaughter. Did the government make mistakes? Sure, said Parnell McNamara, sheriff in McLennan County, Texas. He was deputy marshal the day the ATF raided the Branch Davidian compound east of town. He was there when the gunfire started and the siege began. He defends the actions that day, and defends his government, but admits a lot of lessons were learned. The spirit of Koresh lives on. Several cult survivors remain to build a new Davidian compound amid the ruins. They believe that, on Judgment Day, their loved ones and Koresh will be resurrected to establish God's kingdom on earth. What do you think about the Waco siege? Please leave your thoughts in the comment section. If you liked this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and subscribing to our channel for more intriguing stories like this. Thank you for watching.